Dear listeners, this is the third part of the story. If you haven't seen the previous parts, we recommend you watch them first. The phone rang and pulled me out of my deep sleep. I lay awake for a while, and the phone continued to ring. I fumbled with my hand on the bedside table, and finally pressed the green button. Hello, who is it? I asked. Hello, there's a call for you from the city hospital emergency room. Your wife was brought in an hour ago in a very serious condition. Can you come over now? My wife? I was surprised. I didn't realize it was Natasha. But she and I are divorced. I don't know, but your number is in her phone, as her husband. Your wife is in the operating room on the second floor. Will you be coming? Yes, I'm on my way. I almost ran up to the second floor. Doctor, what happened to her? I asked anxiously. She's badly beaten with a broken arm, collarbone, and some ribs. And she was raped. I'll be more specific later, the doctor said, looking at me suspiciously. Do you two live together? No, she left me over the summer and now lives with another man. I could see why the doctor was looking at me so suspiciously. Do you think I beat her and raped her? I asked, feeling defensive. It's not my place to make any assumptions. Let the police sort it out, the doctor replied, taking off his glasses and wiping them with the hem of his robe. She was picked up by an ambulance called by the neighbors. She was almost naked and covered in blood. The police are on their way to take care of her. Doctor, is she conscious? Can I talk to her? I asked, my mouth dry with excitement. She's unconscious, but she keeps asking for some pain medication. There's another question, the doctor said, taking off his glasses again. She needs an operation. A broken rib has punctured her lung. It's a complicated procedure and, well, it costs money. But we have free medical care, I protested. That's true, but you know what I mean. Medication, rehabilitation, and so on. How much? I asked, growing tired of the doctor's vague explanations. The doctor took out a notebook from his pocket and wrote down a 5-digit number. This is in dollars, he explained. We need to operate. The money will be there by noon today, I assured him. The doctor nodded his head. I quickly dialed my son's number and briefly told him what had happened, without going into too much detail. I asked him to call his sister and come to the hospital. Just then the police arrived. I was questioned for a long time, but in the end, they left me alone, convinced that I had a solid alibi. The hotel clerk confirmed that I had been in my room all night and had only left to answer the phone. And had only left after the call from the hospital. I looked at my watch. It was 7:30 in the morning. There wasn't much time. I thought for a while and dialed the number of my editor. Good morning. It's Yuri. Tell me if I can get an advance for a book I haven't written yet. I'm having problems with Yuri, I said. The editor interrupted me asking, how much do you need? I told him the amount, and he replied, well, it's almost half your fee. I think we can solve that problem. Come to the editor's office at 8 o'clock. I felt a little better and returned to the hotel at 8:30. I quickly changed my clothes, called Jean, and canceled all my business for the day. It seemed like she was not surprised. At the editorial office, everything was solved quickly. The lawyers drew up a contract and transferred the money to me. I immediately called the hospital and 5 minutes later deposited the required amount into her account. Refusing the offered coffee, I went to see Natasha. Well, what can I say? The operation was quite successful. I think that soon your wife will be on the mend, the doctor said, looking at me intently. She told the police she fell down the stairs. Can I go to her? I asked. Yes, but not for long. She's still very weak from the anesthesia, the doctor replied. Natasha was lying covered in a sheet, tangled in tubes and wires. When I came in, she looked at me and tears welled up in her eyes. She moved her lips, trying to tell me something. I stroked her hand and reassured her. Don't worry. Everything will be all right. Natasha tried to smile with the corners of her chapped lips. I practically checked myself into the hospital. They put a couch in her room, and I spent all my time with Natasha. I washed her with a sponge, changed her underwear, and spoon-fed her. Her body was covered in bruises. On her breasts I saw strange burns. It looked like someone had burned her with cigarettes. All this time we hardly spoke. She tried to make small talk, but I avoided it. I had nothing to talk to her about. At one point, we had said everything to each other. The children helped. My daughter came very often to replace me and give me some time to rest. My son didn't forget his mother either. I even began to think that we were a family again, like before. But it only seemed that way. You can't step into the same river twice. After about a month and a half, Natasha began to walk a little. At first, she started walking down the hospital corridor, and then she started going out to the park. And 2 weeks later, Natasha was discharged from the hospital. She didn't need my help anymore. Before I left, I handed Natasha a blue folder with the documents for her apartment and the keys. She didn't immediately understand what was going on and looked at me in surprise. I managed to buy her apartment and put it back in her name. She tried to tell me something, but instead of words, she burst into tears. Without another word, I turned and left. I had to make an effort not to turn around. A man will never forgive the betrayal of the woman he loves. Treason has no statute of limitations, and I loved her too much to forgive. All this time I was tormented by one question: what really happened? Natasha flatly refused to tell me, so I decided to find out for myself. I sat in her yard, talked to the neighbors, and pieced together a picture of what had happened. After a month of living together, Natasha and her promising artist realized that their relationship was not going to end well. As long as there was money, they got along, but then the quarrels and scandals began. One day, Natasha caught her lover in the company of 2 drunken friends. When she tried to drive them out of the house, her new husband explained her place, accompanying the conversation with his fists. And then they raped her, one at a time and all together. They mocked her for a long time, extinguishing burning cigarettes on her breasts. To prevent her from escaping, they tied Natasha to a chair. But when they passed out in a drunken stupor, she managed to untangle the ropes and escape the apartment. What happened next, I already knew. It made sense to me why her new husband never came to see her. Winter was approaching. The last leaves were falling. Some fell almost vertically to the ground, while others were picked up by the wind and whirled around as if in a farewell dance. And sometimes it seemed to me that my fate was spinning in this autumn tango. Life sometimes brings strange surprises. As I learned, one of the men who raped Natasha soon killed himself by throwing himself out of his own kitchen window. The police, as always, were unable to determine the reason for such a desperate act. The other rapist was found in the morning, hanging from a noose. It was clear what had happened. He had drank too much the night before with his friends, and that was it. Hangover syndrome. It was already late at night when I parked my car a block away from the house where the talented artist's studio was located. I put on my gloves, pulled the hood of my jacket over my head, and walked up to the entrance. It was an ordinary combination lock with a standard set of numbers. I went up to the correct floor and took my time. There were 2 apartments on that floor. I put gum on the peephole of my neighbor's door and pulled out a set of lockpicks. It only took me a minute to find the right key and lightly pick the lock. The lock clicked open. The lock clicked quietly and the door flew open. It was a standard apartment with 2 adjoining rooms and a kitchen. I silently made my way into the room where the great painter slept, on a crushed couch among easels and unfinished paintings. The musty air was filled with the smell of booze. I thought to myself, Natasha, didn't you see who you were leaving for? My God, women, are you so blinded by passion? Leaning over, I shook the artist by the shoulder. When he began to show signs of life, I punched him in the temple and knocked him out. When he woke up, he was surprised to find himself taped to a chair. Surprise! I said, you should have seen the fear in his eyes. But most of all, there was animal fear. I carefully, not like an animal after all, ripped the tape off his mouth and pulled back his hood. I wanted to hear his voice. Did you recognize me? I spoke softly but very convincingly. Don't, he cracked, almost in a whisper, realizing that it was useless to shout. There was a peculiar smell. He seemed to be shitting himself with fear. What a poor guy. But this was also a signal to me it was time to end it. I covered his mouth again and slowly drew my silenced pistol from my pocket, after disengaging the safety. The cartridge was already in the chamber, and I didn't have to pull the bolt. Then I put it into a plastic bag so I wouldn't have to look for the shell casing later, and with a practiced movement, pointed it at the artist's head. I pulled the trigger slightly. The gun jerked, going slightly upward, and the bullet hit the right spot. I changed in the car, put my clothes, gun, and gloves in the bag. As I drove along the embankment, I stopped and got out. The moon was shining over the river. A silver trail of moonlight stretched across the water almost all the way to the shore. I threw a bag into the water. P.S. 3 years had passed. My car raced down the highway, dispersing the light snow that had fallen overnight, leaving behind a fast lingering trail. In 5 kilometers the asphalt changed to dirt. During the night, a little frost caught up, and the wheels crunchily broke the thin ice, which covered the puddles glistening in the dim autumn sun. The farther I drove, the narrower the road became. I slowed down and soon I was surrounded by a dense forest. So about 8 more kilometers, and I was at my destination. The midday sun was hazy, and against it the surrounding scenery was particularly sharp. The leaves on the trees were almost gone, and those that remained stood out as bright spots of red and yellow on the gray-green wall of the autumn forest. Around the next bend, a large lake opened up. The road ran almost right alongside the shore, and I could clearly see frothy waves like young lambs strolling across the wide water area. I lowered the window, and a light breeze from the lake brought with it the smell of algae and dampness. The road turned sharply to the left, and a large one-story house made of pine logs came into view. I parked the car near the boat shed, a sturdy Indian-style structure with wooden ornaments and elk antlers that had been blackened by time on the gable. I took a large bag out of the trunk and went up to the porch. A young woman came out to meet me, holding a little boy by the hand. "Hi, is everything okay?" Jean kissed me, looking into my eyes. "We were waiting for you." The little boy wrapped his arms around my leg. "Daddy, well, did you buy it?" I took him in my arms. "I bought it, baby. It's in the car." I held my son close to me. "Let's get it together." The sun was shining brightly. The sky was almost clear, and its dazzling blue was cutting to the eyes. A fresh breeze from the lake played with the tops of tall pines, creating sparkling white clouds.